A lot of people have no idea that on the other side of the planet, things are way different. In this secret place, there are a bunch of creatures that aren't human living hidden all over. And these beings are known by everyone as super dangerous and wicked creatures. On a really disgusting floor, a little rat scurries past some very old boots. And there in an abandoned corner, we see a boy in tattered and dirty clothes. The boy was all alone and lived in a filthy alley forgotten by everyone. He lived in the so-called Lost City, a place isolated from society just for these creatures. With his stomach rumbling loudly from hunger, the kid needed to find anything to eat. So he starts digging for food in the middle of a giant mountain of filthy trash. With great luck, the boy manages to find a lunchbox with some leftovers inside. A huge smile appears on his face, and the kid is overjoyed with the food he found. But when he eats it, he realizes the food has already gone bad and is full of weeds. Suddenly, he feels something strange and stops eating right away, very scared. His food is thrown into the air along with all the trash that was piled up there. 3 mean guys show up and start making fun of the kid, calling him a sewer rat. They make fun of the boy's smell, saying he's like a piece of walking trash. It turns out he was picked on by these same annoying creatures every single day. One of them grabs the boy and asks why he doesn't hunt humans like they always do, and they keep teasing the poor kid for being just a cursed doppelganger. Without any real abilities, he was a failure even among the other creatures. Then, one of the monsters lands a heavy punch on the boy's face without any mercy. The other creatures start hitting the boy over and over without any pity for him. But out of nowhere, one of the guys hitting him stops when he hears a very weird noise. 2 gigantic figures appear and announce that the territory belongs to them. The newcomers attack the bullies, who scream in pain, unable to do anything. Lying on the ground, the boy watches everything in shock at the super intense scene. Terrified, he gets up from the ground and starts running to escape from that place. His only doppelganger ability was the power to curse anyone. When he finds his original human, the person is cursed and passes away instantly. And the worst part is that this happens even if he doesn't want to harm the person. Suddenly, the giant creature grabs him and calls him a complete and total nobody. The boy is terrified as he's caught by that giant and very ugly monster. Then the beast starts tormenting the poor kid, and he screams for the creature to stop. While being crushed, the young man keeps screaming in desperation because of all the pain. But just as he was about to pass out, a golden light completely shines on him. A very gentle voice calls the name Ryudo, and clean shoes appear in front of him. Lying on the ground, he sees a girl he doesn't know standing right there in front of him. The girl looks at him with concern and asks if he really is the Ryudo who disappeared. Not understanding anything, the boy can only ask who this unknown girl is. She says she thought he had vanished and asks if he doesn't remember anything. With a very sad look, the girl seems to finally understand what's going on. It wasn't that he didn't remember anything. In fact, he never knew any of it. She then extends her hand to him and says she's happy he's alive and safe. But he replies that he's not Ryudo and that he's actually just a sewer rat. The scene then shifts to a cell phone alarm going off loudly at 7:40 in the morning. The boy, now clean and in new clothes, suddenly wakes up, very startled by everything. Sitting on the bed, he realizes it was all just a horrible nightmare and nothing more. He then goes down to the kitchen and sees a whole family having breakfast at the table. As he eats something, he thinks about how 3 years have passed since that day. Already dressed for school, he leaves the house and says goodbye to everyone there. He then lets out a big yawn as he walks slowly through the city streets. It's just another peaceful day as he walks through the park with his friends. Out of nowhere, someone touches his shoulder, and the boy turns to see who it was. It's Rakuna, a friend of his, who greets him with a super cheerful and happy good morning. The girl gives him a very gentle smile as the morning sun shines on her face. Then she asks if he has anything planned for summer vacation, which starts tomorrow. He thought all this peace he felt would last forever, but he was very mistaken. His friend then invites him to hang out if he doesn't have anything to do. Since that day 3 years ago, He ended up switching places with the real Ryudo, and it was Rakuna who found him and helped him when the poor guy needed help the most. She took the boy to her house and introduced him to her family as if he were Ryuto. A woman opens the door, very surprised when she sees the state the boy was in. She hugs him tightly and takes care of him as if he were her own real son. Since that day, he has been living a lie, pretending to be someone else all the time, but he didn't care about that, as it was better than going back to living on the streets. Crossing the street, he continues his peaceful walk to school, just like every day, but he thinks that if he tells the truth, he'll only make his friend very sad. So for him, it's okay to continue with this whole lie for a little while longer. If he keeps playing the role of Ryuto, no one will end up getting hurt in the end. And he really didn't want to go back to being a street dweller, not at all. But suddenly, his worst nightmare became a reality right in front of him. A purple portal appears in the middle of the city, and everyone gets terrified. The boy is in shock at the sudden appearance of that super mysterious portal. People start to wonder what that weird gate is in the middle of everything. The two friends are frozen in fear, not knowing what to do at that moment. Soon after, some monsters start coming out of the portal to attack the entire city. One creature grabs a man and devours him in front of everyone without any mercy. People scream in terror as they witness that horrible scene happening so suddenly. Various monsters of all kinds invade the entire city through that portal. The creatures appeared out of nowhere and began to attack everyone who was nearby. A giant, weird-looking monster comes out of the portal and advances toward all the people. The creature gets closer, and the students stand still, frozen with fear. Rakuna starts to cry, terrified by the chaotic and super desperate situation. The boy then takes his friend's hand to try to calm her down a bit. He yells for her to run while a giant monster tries to grab both of them at once. The two of them start running desperately to escape from that super weird creature. But the monster is much faster and almost manages to catch the two running teens. The monsters attack everyone, and people scream in fear of the situation. The girl runs in terror, trying to escape from all those monsters on the street. The boy wonders what's going on and realizes that the creatures are different. Suddenly, Rakuna trips and falls to the ground right in front of a scary monster. A creature with wings descends from the sky and swoops down to attack the fallen girl. The monster opens its giant mouth to devour the young woman who couldn't defend herself. Rakuna is paralyzed with fear, looking at the creature that was attacking her. But her friend jumps in front of her and protects her from the bizarre monster's attack. The creature then bites the boy's arm with great force, and he feels a sharp pain. Rakuna screams his name in desperation when she sees he was attacked by the beast. The monster throws him to the ground, and the boy screams in pain with his arm badly hurt. The girl watches everything in shock, with many tears streaming down her face. The young man feels a horrible pain, but stays strong to protect his friend. He remembers his friend's gentle smile on the day she found him on the street. Back then, she saved him, and now it was his turn to protect her with his life. With a scream of rage, he tears off his own injured arm to break free. The monster lets out a roar of pain when the boy finally manages to get loose. The young man endures the pain and gets ready to flee from that place with his friend. Rakuna helps him up and says that now is their chance to escape. She worries about his injury, but the boy says he's okay. The girl insists that he's not okay at all, and they need to get out of there as fast as possible. The two hide in an abandoned building and find a very strange creature. The long-haired monster stares at the two with a cold and very threatening gaze. They then enter a random room to hide from that strange creature. The boy says he'll take care of his wound, and his friend sits down to rest for a bit. The girl is desperate because his bleeding won't stop at all. She then gets up and says she's going to look for something to help with his injury. He calls out to her and asks her to wait, but the young woman doesn't understand why. The boy apologizes for causing so much trouble and confusion for her, but Rakuna smiles and says they only got this far because of his help, so she tells him not to worry about anything and leaves to look for help. Suddenly, the building's ceiling collapses, and debris falls everywhere. The young man stands there in shock, not understanding what on earth is happening now. He screams his friend's name in desperation when he sees her in danger from the debris. The monster they saw before appears and says it's going to finish them both right there. The creature then charges toward him to attack without any mercy or pity. Rakuna is lying on the ground, covered in rubble and badly injured because of it. He runs towards her, desperate to try and save her in any way he can, but the monster is much faster and attacks him from behind with incredible force. The young man is thrown far away and falls to the ground from the impact of that very strong blow. Hurt and a bit dazed, he tries to get up to continue fighting the beast. The monster then picks up a piece of Rakuna's body and shows it to him with a smile. The creature says it will finish her off, according to the contract they made. Rakuna reaches her hand out to him and calls his name in a very weak voice. The boy watches everything in shock, unable to do anything to help his friend. With a last breath, she asks him to keep on living and smiles one last time. He is paralyzed in horror as he watches his friend pass away right in front of him. The monster then crushes the girl, ending her life once and for all. The creature lets out a roar of victory, and the young man kneels on the ground, motionless. He whispers her name through his tears and all the pain he feels. A memory of when she found him alone and dirty comes to his mind. He remembers how she helped him and took care of him when he needed help the most. On that day, she introduced herself as Rakuna and changed his life forever. But now she was gone, and all that was left was pain and a lot of anger inside him. His eyes glow with a red light of pure rage and immense power. A dark shadow begins to emerge from his body and spread all over the place. He screams in rage, and his power explodes in a purple, very dark and strong aura. With eyes full of hatred, he swears he will not forgive that monster, no matter what. He stands up and says he's going to finish the creature right there, and without a second thought. The monster stares at him with an evil smile, ready to begin the great battle. The creature attacks with its claws, but the boy easily dodges the blow. With a look of pure rage, he promises that he will finish that monster right there. He then vanishes in a cloud of purple smoke and reappears behind his enemy. He asks what the monster is laughing at and glares at it with a look full of hatred. With a wave of his hand, he uses his power to attack the creature with all his might. He launches a purple energy attack that throws the monster far away. The creature is thrown against the wall and roars in pain from the super strong impact. The monster falls to the ground, defeated and with no strength to continue fighting him. But the creature still glares at him with a look of hatred and great contempt. The boy then leaps toward the monster to deliver his grand final attack. With a scream of rage, he prepares to finish that creature once and for all. He says this is the end and delivers a final blow using his dagger made of shadows. The monster's head is severed, and the creature is defeated once and for all. He stands beside the creature's body, panting and very tired from the fight. Looking at his hand, he realizes that his power has finally awakened. He wonders what that power was that he used in the fight against the monster. Suddenly, he remembers Rakuna and is shocked by the scene he sees on the ground. He runs desperately towards her, shouting his friend's name over and over. The young man approaches his friend's body, which is lying motionless on the ground. He stands there in silence, looking at that super tragic and sad scene. A memory of when she invited him to the summer festival comes to his mind. He approaches her body and holds her carefully in his own arms. Rakuna calls his name with a very weak smile on her face. Almost out of strength, he hugs her tightly, and tears begin to stream down his face. She is badly injured, and he knows he can't do anything to save her now. He apologizes to her for not being able to protect her from the monster. With tears in his eyes, he says he couldn't keep his promise to her, but she says she was saved because of him and smiles once more at her friend. He cries and says that even so, he kept lying to her the whole time. He feels like an idiot for not having told her the truth much sooner. Out of nowhere, the monster he faced before appears once again in the same place. The creature regenerates and glares at him with a look of pure evil and hatred. He says that he can't forgive what happened to his friend, no matter what. He swears he won't forgive the monsters, and especially not himself, for everything. He asks Rakuna to wait for him and prepares for the final battle. With a look of hatred, he vows to finish off all the monsters there. But first, he needs to see what's happening in the city right now. He is shocked to see the city destroyed and completely filled with monsters. 3 zombies appear out of nowhere, and a girl is being attacked by all of them. He recognizes the girl and is surprised to see that it was her there. It's Hakua, his partner, who is being attacked by those weird zombies. He uses his power to create a shadow dagger and prepares to fight. He cuts the shadows that were holding Hakua and frees her from the zombies right away. The girl screams in surprise at being suddenly saved by the boy like that. He picks her up in his arms and gets her out of danger, taking her to a safe place. Hakua is confused by the situation and doesn't quite understand what happened. He puts her down on the ground and asks the girl if she is okay now. She thanks him for saving her, and he helps her get up from the ground. The girl looks at him and asks if he is who she thinks he is. They look at each other in silence as the city burns around them nonstop. He realizes that she has recognized him and is shocked by this whole revelation. He says they need to get out of there now and pulls her by the hand to run. The girl follows him without quite understanding what's happening in all that chaos. The white-haired girl then concludes that the boy is actually a copy. The boy is surprised and very confused by her sudden statement. Running beside him, she claims that she can tell easily because the girl reveals that she is also exactly like him in that same regard. Shocked, the protagonist tries to understand what she means by all this. At that, she introduces herself as Hakua and then asks for the young man's name. While the boy thinks about it, she informs him that her allies are nearby. The white-haired girl then asks him to follow her towards a tall building. On top of that building, we see a mysterious man wearing dark glasses. Optimistically, his partner says there's still hope if they find the group. Without many options, the young man decides to trust her for now to see what happens. But suddenly, the girl stops running, completely frightened by the scene. The scene right ahead is horrible, with several bodies scattered on the ground. Desperate, she kneels beside a fallen ally and calls out to him. The boy observes everything in silence as flames consume the entire city. At that moment, the young man's eyes widen, and he warns his colleague about something. The mysterious man stands with his arms open in the midst of all that destruction. With an evil smile, he shows that he's loving all that chaos and confusion. Soon, a portal opens in the sky, and many flying monsters emerge from it. The duo is completely paralyzed, seeing the absurd number of creatures. The white-haired girl confesses that she has never seen so many monsters of that type together. The scary creatures quickly begin to infest the city skies. And to make matters worse, giant purple rifts tear through the buildings around them. The protagonist wonders what else bad could happen at this moment. A huge rift appears right behind them, creating a super strong gust of wind. The young man quickly stands in front of the girl to try and protect her. The tear in space grows larger and larger, threatening to swallow the entire city. The boy deduces that the world is now beginning to completely collapse, but they have no time to think as the skeletons advance very quickly. The shadowy creatures dive rapidly towards the young duo. Using their blades, the two manage to block the monster's initial attack. The white-haired girl then shouts, telling her partner to be careful, and he promptly replies, telling her to stay safe as well. One of the monsters tries to hit the girl with its super sharp claws. With great agility, she leaps backward and dodges the enemy's blow. The protagonist also has to retreat quickly to escape a swift attack. Full of rage, the boy begins to concentrate his purple aura in his right hand, and vowing not to lose there, he unleashes his powerful ability against his target. However, the boy is very shocked to see that the monster managed to dodge. The creature bizarrely flies over the warrior, ready to strike back. In a quick reflex, he uses his dagger to hold back the skeleton's claws. The force of the impact is so great that the young man is dragged back a bit. At that instant, the enemy opens its mouth and starts charging pure energy. A devastating blue laser is fired with full force, destroying the asphalt there. But the boy uses his dark aura to narrowly escape the huge explosion. Without wasting time, he charges forward to slice the monster with his blade. However, he notices he has fallen into a trap when he is surrounded by several creatures. Breaking into a cold sweat, the warrior soon understands that the situation has become much more dangerous. And all the creatures fire their blue lasers at him at the same time. The monsters float in the sky, waiting to see if their target survived. A giant dark shield suddenly appears to block the devastating beams. At that moment, the young man uses all his power, creating enormous hands to protect himself. But the force of the attack is incredible, making the warrior grit his teeth in pain. Then the barrier breaks, and he is thrown to the ground with his shoulder badly injured. Panting, the boy realizes that his aura didn't completely nullify the damage. With that, he gets up in a hurry, desperately looking for his new ally. The protagonist calls the girl's name as he sees the monsters taking over the place. At that moment, he hears a sound coming from the rubble and turns around, very scared. The white-haired girl emerges from the dust, looking exhausted but happy. However, she notices the serious injury on her partner's arm and is astonished. The boy tries to hide the pain and smiles, stating that he barely survived. His partner lowers her head in frustration, feeling that the situation has gotten out of control. And in a serious tone, the young woman warns that they won't be able to win like this. The boy looks at her, confused, as she warns that the current world is already gone. After all, everything around them is destroyed, proving that reality is already over. With determination, the fighter decides that now it's all or nothing to save something. Then the girl leaps towards the large spatial rift, making the young man scream. Flying through the air, the white-haired girl states that she'll do anything for a chance to change things. Desperate, the protagonist runs after her as a creature appears above. The warrior notices the threat and tells his friend to get out of there as fast as possible. But the skeleton monster shows no mercy and mercilessly fires a massive blue beam. The explosion creates a blinding light, forcing the boy to shield his eyes. And as the dust settles, the young man's eyes widen, paralyzed by the scene. Looking ahead, he sees the girl lying on the ground, smoking. Seriously injured, his partner grits her teeth, trying to endure the pain of the attack. The protagonist panics and calls her name with a desperate look on his face. Lying on the ground, the white-haired girl extends her trembling hand, asking for one last favor from her ally. She begs the boy to jump into that mysterious rift in her place. With the monster flying right behind, the young woman assures him that he needs to get there, and without giving him time to breathe, the dark creature advances on the injured girl. The boy's face gets dirty as he hears his friend tell him to look for something. The white-haired girl loses her strength on the destroyed asphalt while the protagonist watches. Using her last bit of energy, she crawls and asks the boy to tell someone. At that instant, her hand falls lifelessly, and a red puddle forms on the ground. The warrior is traumatized, unable to understand anything that's going on. Completely frustrated, the young man turns to face the large anomaly in space. Running towards the portal, he regrets losing his ally even with his powers. And remembering the two fallen girls, the boy cries, feeling like he has failed. Ignoring the pain, the protagonist runs through the flaming street with the monster behind him. The hideous creature opens its jaw again, releasing more energy. The brutal attack hits the young man's back squarely, making him scream in pain. In the midst of his suffering, he remembers the past and questions why he accepted. The devastating beam seems to consume the warrior's body, threatening to erase him. But clenching his teeth hard, the boy refuses to give up and accept it. Using everything he has left, the young man throws himself into the portal, begging to save someone. He plants his foot on the broken asphalt and gives the most powerful push of his life. With a cry of determination, the protagonist crosses the barrier with full force. His mind races as the portal's bizarre energy envelopes his vision, and falling into an abstract abyss, the warrior dives straight into a bright light. Around him, various fragments of memories show the allies he left behind. During the fall, He ends up remembering the beautiful smile of the girl in her school uniform. Suddenly, the boy wakes up in shock and his eyes widen, confused by everything. He then notices that he is sitting at a desk inside a classroom. The other students are talking peacefully, while the young man remains at his desk. The protagonist then looks back, trying to understand what was happening. The view of the school building under a blue sky shows that everything is fine now, but the boy stares at his own hands, not believing what he was seeing there. With that, he mentally wonders if he somehow managed to go back in time. At that moment, a familiar voice calls his name, wanting to know if something is wrong. He turns around and calls his friend's name, shocked to see the young woman right there, alive and well. Without a second thought, the boy gets up from his chair, feeling an absurd sense of relief. He's in such a hurry that his desk ends up being pushed back. The brown-haired young woman is slightly startled by her friend's reaction. Overcome with emotion, the protagonist hugs her tightly, saying he thought he'd never see her again. All the classmates stare at the two, shocked by the scene. Realizing the awkwardness, the boy pulls away and apologizes profusely, completely embarrassed. Giving a gentle smile, his ally says she'll go on ahead to class. The warrior remains standing there in the middle of the room, processing that she's alive. Outside, the girl clutches her notebooks to her chest, her face red. Time passes quickly, and the sun begins to set, painting the school in orange hues. Sighing, the protagonist walks along and fears that the young woman now hates him for that. He confirms that he has indeed returned in time to 1 year before the tragedy. At that, he recalls his partner's last request, telling him to find someone. The young man is absolutely certain that the disaster with the monsters will happen again, but with a serious expression. He vows that this time he will be able to protect everyone. He plans to use his own abilities to prevent the tragedy from happening again. And as night falls, the protagonist begins to walk down a dark alley. The boy arrives at the entrance of a graffitied tunnel that marks the area's boundary. The warrior stares at the place, hardly believing he had to come back here. The scene reminds him of how miserable his life was there before. In those difficult times, the poor boy was always exhausted, trying to survive, and as a simple street dweller, he was kicked around like trash by anyone. Frequently beaten, he would be thrown to the ground, dropping his few belongings. The pain and humiliation made him cry, huddled up with no one to help. The poor guy lived abandoned in corners, having to sleep near rats and filth. We then see his old identification card, revealing his real name. With this, it becomes clear that the identity he was using was a big sham. Before being taken in, the protagonist was just a dirty and lonely street dweller. The boy walks through the neighborhood, remembering that the anomalies gather around there. To prevent the monsters from attacking civilians, someone created a control system, so he thinks that the food distributor might have a clue about who he's looking for. Soon, the warrior arrives at a small building that serves as a meeting point. But upon entering the place, the young man finds it strange not to see anyone at the reception. Suddenly, a weird guy gets his attention, insulting him for his clothes. The tough-looking guy gives a malicious smile and asks what a rich kid was doing there. Trying to avoid trouble, the student backs away and lies, saying he got lost. But the thug doesn't let it go and demands that the boy hand over his things. At that, the stranger begins to reveal his form, releasing bandages from his face. The protagonist's eyes widen as he realizes he's run into one of the anomalies. The enemy takes the form of a bizarre mummy, mocking his bad luck. The student is completely astonished, asking the bizarre monster to wait, but the creature just laughs at the situation, telling the boy to try not to get taken out. However, the bizarre monster notices something is wrong and gets confused by the scene. The protagonist uses a shadow blade just in time to block the blow. With a relieved smile, the boy notes that he managed to protect himself in time. He then wonders if he can really use the same power from the future. The anomaly gets angry, noticing that the young man also has powers, and tells him to stop. The warrior then jumps high, managing to dodge the destructive bandages. Holding his weapon firmly, the boy realizes he has no other choice now, and, diving with full force through the air, He advances toward the bizarre enemy. The clash between the blade and the drill-shaped arm creates a wave of energy. Feeling the powerful impact, the creature ends up being pushed back. Furious at that audacity, the monster grits its teeth and snarls at him. But at that exact moment, the traveler charges dark energy in his chest. Unleashing all his power, the student fires a dark beam at the anomaly. The violent explosion sweeps across the asphalt, throwing the thug far away. Completely defeated, the bizarre enemy falls hard onto the stone floor. With that, the creature loses its bandages and returns to a human appearance. The protagonist sighs in relief, remembering that the place is still dangerous. However, he soon recalls his true objective, and his expression changes. Bending down near the injured man, the boy asks about Rai Kurozu. The defeated man stammers in fear, questioning if he was talking about the faction's leader. Seeing the panic on the aggressor's face, the warrior confirms that he knows him. Pointing the knife with a smile, the student convinces the coward to talk. It's revealed that this special faction gathers various monsters in the lost area. These agents isolate dangerous anomalies and often eliminate them, and that man named Kurosu is precisely the Grand Commander of the organization. Following the thug's clues, the protagonist walks through a dark tunnel. He finally arrives in front of a huge metal door and finds the place. But inside the location, a mysterious man with black hair stands in silence. Unaware of the danger, the young man knocks on the door, wanting to know if anyone was there. To his surprise, the doorknob turns easily, revealing it was unlocked. The boy enters the place and is amazed by the luxurious decoration of the hall. Suddenly, the feared faction leader silently appears behind the student. Without giving him time to react, the man places a sharp blade against his neck. Staring with glowing red eyes, Commander Kurosu calls him an imposter. In a threatening tone, the powerful leader demands to know what he wanted there. The time traveler gulps, feeling the killer pressure from that hunter. Sweating nervously, the warrior raises his hands, stammering as he tries to explain himself. But the leader has no patience and delivers a strong kick, sending the boy flying. The poor guy falls face first onto the fancy floor of the place, feeling a lot of pain. At that, the big guy mercilessly steps on the intruder's head, pinning him there. Looking down, the man mocks the student's boldness, thinking he has a death wish. Begging for his life, the boy finally reveals that he was sent by Hakua. Hearing that familiar name makes the dangerous commander's eyes widen. Seizing the opportunity, the boy warns that a disaster will destroy the world. He tries to warn about the terrible monsters that will wipe out humanity. However, the cruel man doesn't believe those words and kicks the young man again. The strong blow throws the protagonist far away, making him hit the wall. Badly injured, the student drags himself across the floor, begging the man to listen. The man in the coat steps hard on the boy's head, keeping him on the ground. At that, the big guy says that if the young man wants to be heard so badly, there's a condition. He looks at the boy with his red eyes and challenges him to touch his earring. The protagonist is confused as the leader says he doesn't care how. The hunter maintains an imposing posture, demanding to see the student's power. Sweating nervously, the warrior realizes that the enemy knows about his abilities. Without many options, the traveler slowly gets up, accepting the challenge. And letting out a cry of determination, the boy charges forward, trying to throw a punch. But the commander easily dodges the attack by just moving his neck. Without wasting time, the young man reaches out his hand, thinking he could grab it. However, the leader shows insane speed and manages to dodge everything, completely exhausted. The boy takes a deep breath, feeling the difference in strength. The mysterious man looks at the situation with boredom and asks if that was all. At that, the big guy states that the boy should have felt real pain. He reminds the protagonist of that hellish vision and all the sadness and anger, and making the young man remember the past, the leader asks what he gained. These cruel words hit the student, causing a dark aura to cover him. With his hands glowing, the traveler recalls the moment he gained his powers. Observing the scene calmly, the commander confirms his suspicions about the boy. The warrior is surrounded by intense energy, feeling something awaken. Then the boy screams in fury and materializes a giant hand to crush his rival. But the hunter takes a calm leap backward, mocking the slowness of the attack. However, this was a distraction, and the boy appears above with a shadow blade. Even so, the faction leader moves faster and warns that he's slow. With a brutal move, the man lands an elbow strike, sending the young man flying. The impact is so strong that the traveler flies across the hall, breaking the doors. Lying in the debris, the protagonist grits his teeth in pain from the enemy's strength. The man in the coat approaches slowly, saying that was just the beginning. At that, the big guy humiliates the boy, saying he's an incapable nobody, but the warrior refuses to lose and raises his head, showing his resolve. He painfully remembers his dear friend, fallen on the ground, begging to live. And he also remembers the other young woman who sacrificed herself, wanting him to tell someone. Carrying all this weight, the student promises that he will save both allies. The scene cuts to a beautiful view of the city, covered by the peaceful sunlight. Soon we see an apartment building, illuminated by the late afternoon on a quiet street. In the room, a young brown-haired girl walks toward her balcony. As she walks, we can see her tactical uniform and a combat mask. The girl rests her hands on the balcony railing, enjoying the end of day breeze. With a serene look, she vows to do everything for the one who saved her life. The sunlight reflects in the young woman's attentive eyes, showing her motivations. Back to the fight, the protagonist flies through the air, breaking the scenery. The impact is devastating, and the boy rolls uncontrollably down the dark corridor. Completely injured, he falls on his back, feeling a huge throbbing pain. The powerful man walks up to the student and calls his effort pathetic. Staring at the fallen boy, the hunter confesses that he expected a better fight. But trembling badly, the traveler tries to get back up, begging for more time. Drawing strength from beyond, the young man stands, covered in his dark energy. In a last-ditch effort, he begs for the fight and launches several shadow claws. However, the enemy defends against all the attacks with his hands, saying he's stubborn. But suddenly, the hunter's eyes widen as a shadow passes by. The powerful leader stands firm, exuding a purple aura as he steps on the hand. But the young man looks at him with determination, having a sharp and energetic gaze. Seeing this, the hunter gives a slight smile, realizing the kid was hiding. However, without giving any chances, the big guy raises his leg and delivers a brutal kick. With the strong impact, the student ends up being thrown out of the building. The warrior falls near some barrels as the man approaches and warns him. Leaning on the metal, the boy is confused, not understanding what the opponent said. The leader then stares at the target with his glowing eyes, deciding to extract the power. With a sinister smile, the feared commander prepares to use his ability. Suddenly, an absurd energy rips through reality, revealing a city in ruins. The scenery changes completely, showing leaves flying in the night wind and a glow. Various plants and foliage have taken over the walls of the buildings. Sitting on the broken ground, the protagonist looks around, wondering where he ended up. The view then focuses on a beautiful full moon shining brightly in the starry night. Soon we see a huge building completely covered in plants under the blue light. Sitting on the cracked ground, the boy looks around, confused, wanting to know where he is. But the big leader warns that this is the realm of night, a world separate from the living. The man explains that this is the domain of Aberrations, which is why he didn't know it. Shocked, the young man remains crouched, observing the frightening urban landscape. Walking calmly, the commander comments that clones do not possess power. However, he reveals that sometimes when emotions explode, something different happens. The man in the coat then states that a special ability awakens in them. Pointing out the fact, the hunter says the boy is one of those rare cases and surprises him. With a sinister smile and covered in a dark aura, the master calls him to combat. Without backing down, the student materializes his shadow blade, agreeing to the challenge. But suddenly, the commander asks him to wait upon noticing a glow in the sky. The time traveler lowers his weapon, confused by the interruption. At that moment, the young man's eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the threat. Two giant skeleton monsters float in the air, the same ones from the future. The master pulls out a red knife, warning that these phantoms are different. Sweating nervously, the boy hears the man say that these monsters are never on their side. Without wasting time, the warrior charges towards the enemy, which is preparing a beam. With the blade in hand, the boy understands that the monsters from the future came from here. The floating creatures stare at the pair below, noticing the two intruders. The monstrosities then dive swiftly towards the boys for the takedown. Very tense, the student uses his abilities, creating shadow hands to defend himself. But the man in the coat steps in front, dashing to slice the enemy with his knife. With a cold expression, the commander demonstrates all his combat experience. The time traveler watches the scene, impressed by the hunter's speed. At that, the leader tells the young man not to hesitate and says he'll be watching. Gritting his teeth, the boy agrees, stating that he needs to defeat the anomaly. Releasing a lot of energy, he creates giant hands, vowing that he needs to change the future. He tries to grab the enemies, but the skeletons are fast and dodge easily. The warrior runs across the destroyed asphalt, realizing he can't get close. Watching from a distance, the powerful man questions what fear is holding the boy back. The master agrees that in a direct fight, the boy would end up being easily wiped out. However, the hunter remembers that the student is a shadow user and needs to use that. The leader gives the biggest hint, telling the young man to stop focusing only on his power to win. The monster fires its blue flames toward the hero, who understands the strategy. In a swift move, the boy slides across the ground, dodging the hot blast. The enraged creature releases a devastating laser, tearing through everything in its path. Maintaining his balance, the student slides through the scenery, escaping the explosion. Very focused, the traveler analyzes the monster's every move. Waiting for an opening, the enemy suddenly charges, trying to land a blow, but the young man ducks. Floating in the air, the anomaly turns again, preparing an attack to annihilate him. With pure strength, the boy uses his shadow blade to block the powerful attack. Sweating nervously, the boy holds back the charge, feeling he's close to his plan. At that, the warrior discreetly steps right on top of the creature's shadow on the ground. Taking control of the situation, the hero uses the enemy's darkness to trap it. Keeping his foot firm on the asphalt, he locks the phantom's movements, leaving it vulnerable. Celebrating the victory, the student flashes a confident smile, stating, "Gotcha!" and using his summoning power, enormous dark arms emerge from the shadow and grab it. Completely defenseless, the bizarre creature is captured by the shadow hands with no escape. But the boy screams with all his might, warning that a certain creature won't escape him. Suddenly, a skeleton-shaped anomaly appears, being enveloped by shadow hands. With that, the student materializes a sinister dagger, feeling the energy in the blade. And with a single blow, he cuts the skeletal monster into several pieces at once. The bizarre creature falls to the ground, completely defeated, with its bones scattered. With a victorious smile, the young man celebrates, realizing he has finally managed to win. But the faction leader just watches the scene calmly as the boy breathes, exhausted. With a slight smile, the commander thinks that this type of apparition is easy to defeat. However, a blue blur flies past the hunter's face, catching him by surprise. At that, the man in the coat realizes something is wrong and notices his earring is gone. And we see that the student managed to grab the shiny accessory without the rival noticing. The faction leader is completely shocked, touching his ear and seeing he was tricked. The boy then smiles victoriously and warns that now the big guy will have to listen to him. However, even while smiling, the young man feels his body weaken after all that effort, and with no strength left, the traveler passes out and collapses onto the dirt floor of that alley. At that moment, the powerful hunter kneels and supports the boy's head on his lap. The student remains completely unconscious and vulnerable in the man's arms. The leader looks at the unconscious boy with a serious but somewhat thoughtful expression. Suddenly, dozens of other skeletal monsters emerge from the walls, surrounding the two. But unshaken, the commander cuts his own finger, making a drop of blood glow. With this, he summons a huge red, cross-shaped sword with a powerful aura. And unleashing his energy, all the creatures are sliced by beams of red light. In seconds, The monsters are completely annihilated by the energy beams from that weapon. The man then smiles, realizing that the boy might be more useful than he thought. With the end of the illusion, the landscape returns to normal, showing the dark alley from before. Sometime later, the young traveler opens his eyes and finds himself lying in a strange room. The boy sits up in bed, all confused, and wonders what strange place this was. He then turns to the window, observing the cityscape outside. Approaching the glass, the student stares at his own reflection, a bit pensive, and at that moment, the protagonist realizes that somehow he managed to get back home. But a familiar voice asks if he has finally woken up, and we see the leader there in the corner. The young man is startled by the man's presence, but confirms that he was already wide awake. With a slight smile, the hunter says that, as promised, he will now listen to his story. Next, the commander opens the door to a large office for the two to talk. The boy enters the luxurious room and is impressed by the place's decor. The leader sits in his chair while the young man stammers, not knowing how to start his explanation. Gathering his courage, the student reveals that he actually came from 1 year in the future. The commander rests his chin on his hand and questions the boy about this story of the future. The traveler confirms and warns that if nothing is done, the world will collapse, and he shows a vision of a giant portal opening in the middle of a crowded city. From it came monsters that attacked the streets, causing destruction and much despair. The boy says he knows this whole story sounds impossible to believe at first, and sitting in his chair, the faction leader agrees that it all sounds quite ridiculous. But the young time traveler firmly insists that everything he said is true. Seeing the man's reaction, the boy is disappointed, thinking he won't believe him. However, the commander surprises the boy and asks what he intends to do about it. The student is completely confused by that unexpected question from his former rival. Then, after thinking for a bit, the young man clenches his fist, showing his determination, and with a sharp gaze, he declares that he wishes to become stronger than anyone else, strong enough to annihilate all the Aberrations that destroyed the world in the future. Listening to everything with a smile, the commander finally understands the boy's goal, but he quickly puts the boy down, saying that unfortunately, the student is too weak right now. However, the leader reveals that there is a chance for the young man to get very strong. The boy is very confused by that proposal and asks what the man meant. It is then revealed that the Yatagarasu group had a man called the Shadow Master. This man was the one who founded the faction and was the strongest shadow user of all. He was an awakened doppelganger and was also the one who took in the leader, who was a vampire. The student is shocked to learn this, and the big guy asks to be called just Rai. The young man agrees, and the faction leader says that this whole story happened a long time ago. In a flashback, we see a younger Rai fighting alongside the master against a green monster. The bizarre creature was being attacked by several scary skeletal apparitions. One of the skeletons fires a blast of blue energy with enormous destructive power. Even while defending with his blade, the young Rai felt the pressure of the powerful attack. The energy explosion sweeps the area, throwing the hunter back with great force. Kneeling, the vampire looked at the scene, exhausted but still determined to fight. Rai explains that his master was a warrior who defeated powerful enemies one by one. The time traveler is impressed, imagining how strong that man must have been. Suddenly, Rai notices someone at the door and tells the person to enter the meeting room. We can then see someone's steps approaching the large, dark wooden table, and several members of the faction enter the office with very serious expressions on their faces. The boy is startled by the arrival of so many different people at once. A pink-haired girl approaches the student, making the poor guy blush all over. He accidentally bumps into another person and apologizes, all awkward. But the man in the top hat and mask glares at the young man with a very intimidating and cold look. The leader then tells the newcomer to get drinks for 7 people from the office pantry. Meanwhile, the man in glasses approaches, wanting to make a report to the boss. He picks up a remote control and says he has something very important to show everyone. With that, the room's screen lights up, and the other members sit down to watch the presentation. It is revealed that lately, several strange portals have been appearing all over the city. The man in glasses continues his serious report, pointing to the faction leader, and there's also the case of a mysterious man in a white coat who has been seen in several locations. This man always appears near the portals, and the boy returns with the drinks. Rai reflects on the increase in the number of portals and the constant presence of that guy. A member asks if the man in white is creating the portals, and another calls him an old man, but Ray ignores the conversation and calls the young time traveler's attention. He warns that if the boy sees that man, he should report it, as he will be their enemy. The student is completely shocked by that revelation and wonders about being an enemy. With a smile, Rai announces that from that day on, the young man is part of the Yatagarasu. The boy's eyes widen, unable to believe he was accepted into the group so suddenly. At that, two members whisper to each other, wanting to know who that new boy was. The leader thinks that one day the student will become like the legendary Shadow Master. The boy stares into space with a serious and thoughtful look, processing all the information, and remembering his friends, he decides he will do whatever it takes to save their lives. With eyes full of determination, the young man declares that he will become the Shadow Master. The scene cuts to a sunny day, showing the facade of a large, ordinary school. And inside the gym, several students are playing a lively game of volleyball. The score is 23-24, and someone shouts the name of a certain Rakuna. A girl jumps high to spike the ball with force, securing the victory for her team. With incredible speed, the ball hits the opponent's court floor, scoring the point. Her teammates celebrate the incredible play, hugging the young athlete with joy. The young athlete smiles happily and makes a peace sign with her fingers, celebrating the win. Meanwhile, on the other court, some boys were also playing a game of basketball. The protagonist watched the scene from afar with a slightly flushed expression on his face. Then a blonde classmate approaches and comments on how nice it must be to be a girl to have fun. This is Rensano, and he asks the boy if he doesn't agree with that idea too. At that, his friend suggests they start playing for real, and the young man is a bit surprised. And during the game, a player shoots the ball, trying to score a basket for his team. But with incredible agility, the protagonist manages to steal the ball from the opponent. Desperate, the other players shout for their teammates to try and surround the boy. However, with a quick dribble, the student flies past two defenders at once. With a confident smile, he advances down the court without anyone being able to stop him. Seeing the play, a classmate shouts for someone named Soyama to try and stop the boy's advance. The two friends watch the scene from the bleachers with an expression of complete surprise, and in Rakuna's eyes, we can see the young man's reflection, showing how impressed she is. Nearing the basket, the boy jumps for the shot, being guarded by a defender. However, he manages to make the basket perfectly, securing 2 more points for his team. His friend Ren celebrates the incredible play and congratulates the student on the great shot. The brown-haired girl is completely shocked and flushed by the boy's skill. Sometime later, at the end of class, the classroom door is shown in the afternoon sun. The protagonist approaches Rakuna to talk a bit before they leave, but the blonde friend suddenly appears and asks what the two were whispering about. The pair gets all embarrassed and nervous, quickly denying that they were dating. Even so, the friend continues to tease them, finding their reaction very amusing. To break the tension, he suggests the 3 of them visit their old secret base. The girl likes the idea, and the protagonist agrees, wanting to know if the place still exists. The 3 friends walk through an old alley that leads to an abandoned area of the city, and they finally arrive in front of an old brick building that was their secret base. Inside the place, we see some old and dusty arcade machines in the corner. Sitting at the table, the friends reminisce about the old days when they used to skip class together, and in a memory, we see the blonde friend with an expression of pure anger on his face. The 3 were in detention, holding heavy buckets in the hallway of the old school. The girl complained that she couldn't take it anymore, while the boys suffered in silence. Back in the present, the friends laugh, remembering how terrible their teacher was. Eating her lunchbox, The young woman says she never wants to go through something so bad again. The blonde friend then teases the girl, asking why she always eats the same thing. He laughs and asks what the problem is, since he also likes that weird food. Observing the scene, the protagonist thinks that he needs to protect this world for them. With a determined look, the boy promises himself that he will fight for his friends. Suddenly, the young man's cell phone on the table starts vibrating with an intense glow. The boy picks up the device, confused, and wonders what that strange notification could be. On the screen, he sees a mission alert to eliminate a creature on a nearby street. The student tenses up as he reads the mission title, with a very high urgency level. He remembers that this was the emergency alert that Ray had explained to him before. His friends notice his worried expression and ask if something is wrong. Trying to play it cool, the boy gives a forced smile and says it was nothing important. He then makes up an excuse, saying he remembered something urgent and has to go. The two friends are confused by their classmates' haste and ask him to wait a bit. But without giving time for explanations, the young man runs out of the hideout in a hurry. As he runs, he gets annoyed for receiving the mission right when he was with his friends. Suddenly, a frightening scream echoes through the alley, and the boy stops running instantly. Without a second thought, the boy runs toward the noise to see what happened. When he arrives, he finds a girl lying on the ground of the dark alley, all alone. Kneeling beside her, the student asks with concern if she was feeling okay, but with the young woman passed out in his arms, he wonders what on earth happened there. Suddenly, the protagonist feels a strange presence and looks to the side, startled. He sees a mysterious man in a mask and shouts, asking who was there with them. This is Rose, an executive of Yatagarasu, and he regrets arriving too late at the scene. The young man recognizes the man, and the executive tells him to stay back as civilians can't be there. Rose then realizes he's seen the boy before and remembers seeing him at the hideout. But suddenly, the executive feels another presence and looks at a suspicious shadow in the alley. And from there emerges a bizarre three-headed creature with horns and glowing eyes. Several other similar anomalies appear in the alley, surrounding the two boys. The protagonist is terrified by those things, and the executive calls them devourers. He explains that if these creatures consume someone's shadow, that person loses their life. Meanwhile, at the hideout, the two friends wait for their classmate, who hasn't returned. The girl is worried because the boy isn't answering her messages, and her friend doesn't know anything. Ren then suggests they stop by the young man's house to see if he was there. The brown-haired girl agrees with the idea, still very worried about her friend, and with that, the two leave the hideout and walk together through the alley at dusk. The blonde friend jokes that maybe the boy's overprotective mother called him. He says that the young man's parents are very careful, which is why he disappears from time to time. But the girl continues to have a bad feeling and hopes that nothing bad has happened. Suddenly, the reflection of a bizarre monster appears in the glass of an abandoned shop. The young woman stops walking and looks back, confused, feeling that something was very wrong. Her friend notices her expression and asks if something suddenly happened to her. But at that moment, a creature with horns emerges from the shadows, ready to attack the girl. The young woman is paralyzed with fear, her eyes wide, unable to move. Desperate, the blonde friend screams the girl's name as he sees the monster approaching. The creature charges full speed at the student with its sharp, glowing claws. And with a swift move, the monster manages to grab the girl's shadow with its hand. The young woman feels something strange and realizes her shadow has been captured by the creature. With that, the girl loses all her strength and falls unconscious onto the dark alley floor. Her blonde friend watches the scene from a distance, completely in shock at what he just saw. The young woman remains lying on the ground, motionless, with a pained expression on her face. Desperate, the boy screams his friend's name, feeling a terrible fear take over him. Back to the other fight, the two boys face a group of monsters in the dark alley. One of the creatures leaps to attack the protagonist with its sharp claws in one blow. But Rose also leaps over the monster, preparing to defend the young student. With a swift move, the executive extends his hand toward the bizarre creature, and with a powerful kick, he sends the monster flying, saving the boy's life. The protagonist is surprised by the agility and strength of that faction member. An army of creatures observes the two boys with their glowing eyes in the darkness. Rose complains that the report said only 7 monsters, but now there are many more. Suddenly, an aura of energy envelopes the executive's hand, and his nails grow. His features change completely, and his body transforms into a fierce creature. And now in his werewolf form, Rose announces that he will defeat all of them at once. The creature charges full speed at the monsters while the young man watches from a distance, and with incredible speed, he tears several creatures apart with his sharp claws. The student is impressed by the transformation and the incredible power of that werewolf. Having defeated 4 monsters, the werewolf smiles and prepares to finish off the rest. But one of the creatures manages to escape, running down the dark alley to flee the fight. Seeing this, the protagonist prepares to go after the monster before it gets away. The young man shouts for the monster to wait, but ends up tripping and falling face first on the ground. The werewolf gets annoyed and yells at the boy not to go out alone because it's too dangerous. Even though he's angry, he knows he can't let the student go after the monster like that. So he pushes the creatures aside and clears a path with his strength and claws. But as he looks down the alley, he realizes the boy has already disappeared and wonders where he went. The young man runs and realizes that the path leads to the secret base where his friends are. Using his abilities, he creates shadow hands to try and stop the fleeing monster, and with a leap, he manages to grab the creature in mid-air to immobilize it at once. Using all his strength, the boy throws the monster hard onto the ground to defeat it. He then summons his shadow dagger and finishes the creature with a precise blow. With the monster defeated, the student breathes a sigh of relief after that chase. He remembers that the werewolf was fighting 5 monsters, and now 6 have been defeated. The boy starts running back towards the hideout, worried about his friend's safety. He hopes that his friends manage to get home safely and sound. When he arrives at the alley, he finds his friend kneeling on the ground, completely in shock, and right after, he sees his friend lying unconscious with a pale expression on her face. Desperate, the protagonist runs to them and asks his friend what happened there. His classmate explains that a black monster suddenly attacked them, and he couldn't do anything. The young man hugs his friend and asks if Ren is hurt, but he says he's fine. At that, the protagonist suggests they hide inside the base for now. Inside, the blonde friend wonders if there's anything they can use to defend themselves. The boy lays his friend on the couch and asks Ren to keep an eye on her for a moment. Ren is confused and asks what his friend plans to do in this dangerous situation. The protagonist says he's going after the monster to get his friend's shadow back. The girl remains unconscious on the couch, her body completely weak and without energy, and we see that her hand is pale and cold, showing that she's in a serious condition. The young time traveler realizes that the future has already changed, and this wasn't supposed to happen. Ren gets worried and asks how his friend plans to face that monster alone. With a confident smile, the boy assures him that everything will be fine and that he can do it. He asks Ren to take care of the girl and promises that he will manage to save her no matter what. But before he could leave, his friend calls him and asks him to be very careful out there. The protagonist leaves the hideout and starts looking for the monster in the dark alley. He sees several people lying on the ground and realizes that they all had their shadows stolen. Suddenly, the monster appears in front of him, and the boy prepares for the final combat. With a determined look, the young man faces the creature, knowing he needs to defeat it. The anomaly is holding his friend's shadow and those of other people in its hands. The monster then begins to absorb the last remaining shadow to become stronger. Seeing this, the student realizes that his friend's shadow must also be with it. And with a scream of fury, the boy charges with his shadow dagger to attack the creature. The bizarre creature extends its hand and materializes a huge scythe to defend itself. And with a swift move, the anomaly attacks the young man with a devastating and fast slash. The protagonist is completely shocked by the speed and power of that surprise attack. The monster observes the boy with its glowing eyes, ready to continue the battle. The creature turns to the young man and is confused to see that he's no longer there. Suddenly, the boy appears from behind the monster and extends his hand for a quick attack. He hides behind a wall and realizes that the creature didn't see him pass by. The protagonist is surprised to see that the anomaly is opening a portal to escape. An intense light envelops the creature as it prepares to enter the portal. The young man knows he can't let the monster escape and runs to stop it in time. But suddenly, a female voice shouts for him not to approach that portal at all costs. The student stops running and looks to the side, surprised by that mysterious voice. A girl in a mask and tactical gear appears in the alley and asks who that boy is. The protagonist recognizes the masked girl and calls her by the name of Hakua. She then warns him to back away, because that portal leads to a very dangerous place. With a smile, he shows his cell phone and reveals that he is also a member of Yatagarasu. The girl is surprised because her version from a year ago didn't know him yet, but he says he's going anyway because his friend's shadow was stolen. At that, the masked girl holds him by the hand and asks him to wait a bit. She asks if he can use an ability and if he knows what to do if the portal closes. The boy is confused by the question, and the young woman confirms that the portal can close. She explains that the portals close on their own after the monsters are defeated. Seeing that he is a rookie, the girl decides to go with him to help him on the mission. The student is a little embarrassed by the situation and thanks her for her help. And with that, the two walk hand in hand toward the purple portal in the middle of the alley. As they pass through, they arrive in an abandoned city with a dark atmosphere. The boy stops running and looks around, wondering where the shadow devourer is. The girl then introduces herself as Hakua and asks what her new partner's name is. The young man starts to say his name, but realizes he can't reveal his identity. The scene changes to a city in flames as he thinks of a quick answer. So he introduces himself as Salt and says he is also a doppelganger like her. The masked young woman smiles and is impressed that he already knows about her identity. He asks if she knows where the monster is, and she says they prefer dark places. The girl explains that dark places are ideal, and that upon defeating a devourer, the shadows it stole return to their owners automatically and safely. She assures him that if they recover the shadow within 24 hours, his friend will be fine. With a determined expression, the young man says he understands and will do whatever it takes. The two then start searching in abandoned places where the monsters might be hiding. They continue their search and carefully enter another part of the abandoned building. The young woman suggests going deeper, but the boy says no and points to something outside. He shows the red moon and explains that when it becomes full, the monsters get stronger. The girl remains silent and looks at him, waiting for him to finish his explanation. With a clenched fist, the boy thinks that he can't afford to lose anyone else. Ignoring the girl's warning, the student says he will continue anyway. She shouts with concern and warns him that it's very dangerous to continue during the night. But with a firm gaze, the boy says that even so, he will not run from the fight. He then turns and starts walking alone through the dark and abandoned city. Seeing his determination, the masked young woman sighs and decides she can't let him go alone. She says she will stay with him until the end, and the two resume walking together through the city. At that moment, two shadowy creatures watch them from a window with glowing eyes. Several other monsters appear and wonder if they are apparitions from the world of the living. A larger creature with an axe appears and agrees that they are a real nuisance. Suddenly, several green arrows are fired toward the two young people in the courtyard. They stop in the middle of the ruins, and the boy suggests they investigate the surrounding area. The white-haired girl stops suddenly and looks up, feeling a strange presence. He apologizes for dragging her into this, and she says not to worry because she came of her own free will. At that, an arrow with a purple aura flies at high speed toward the student, and the arrow narrowly misses him, grazing by and sticking into a tree. Startled, the boy shouts, asking who is there. and they both get into a combat stance. Hidden in the shadows, a little monster gets angry for missing its surprise attack, and with that, an army of small creatures with glowing eyes appears to surround them. The young man asks who they are, and the girl identifies them as monstrous and warns him to be careful. These creatures are apparitions from the realm of night and seem to be very dangerous. The girl tries to negotiate and asks them to let them pass because they don't want to fight, but the monster leader tells her to shut up and warns that this is their territory. The young woman says she didn't know and remembers that they are also apparitions like the two of them. The monster leader laughs and says that they consume humans. Unlike the two young people, the protagonist is completely shocked and scared by that bizarre revelation. With a malicious smile, the monster says that humans are delicious and addictive. The boy realizes that there is no way for them to understand each other and that a fight is inevitable. One of the monstrous asks its leader what they should do with the two intruders. The other monsters shout in unison, demanding the heads of the two for invading their territory. The leader smiles and tells his subordinates that they heard what needs to be done. With that, the two young people summon their shadow daggers and prepare for battle. The boy says it seems they have no choice, and his partner agrees with him. Surrounded on all sides, they face the horde of monsters while an archer takes aim. The archer in the tree prepares his bow, an arrow to shoot one of the young people. He then fires a precise arrow toward the white-haired girl in the courtyard. Desperate, the protagonist summons a giant shadow hand to protect her from the attack. While he defends against the arrows, the girl fights the monsters on the courtyard ground. The young man complains that there are too many monsters, and his partner shouts his name to warn him. He suggests they defeat the leader first to break the enemy's formation. The two then split up and charge with full force toward the horde of monstrous in the courtyard. The protagonist dodges a blow and attacks a monster while the leader jumps away. The minute leader lands on a crate and challenges them to catch him if they can. The two young people run toward the leader, but the boy notices something is wrong and shouts. They step on a pile of leaves and trigger a hidden trap on the ground. With that, the ground opens up and the two suddenly fall into a deep, dark hole. The boy shouts that it's a trap as the two continue to fall without stopping. In desperation, he reaches out his hand, trying to grab onto something, but there's nothing there. The monsters celebrate around the hole and shout for the two of them to just disappear. Meanwhile, the two young people continue to fall and scream in despair into the dark pit. The boy reaches out his hand with a panicked expression as the fall seems endless. But luckily, their fall is cushioned when they land hard in a pool of water. Once out of the water, the girl says it was lucky there was water there, and the boy agrees, despite being soaking wet. The student looks around and wonders where they ended up after that fall. Carefully, he gets out of the water and steps onto solid ground to explore the mysterious place. Then he realizes that the glow he saw was coming from some blue flowers on the cave floor. Looking up, the boy confirms it was a trap, and the red moon has already appeared. The girl explains that with the red moon, they can't return to the world of the living. The young man is confused, and she says that they usually enter through a portal or a gate. But as long as the red moon is in the sky, none of those escape methods can be used. He understands the situation and says that either way, they need to get out of that hole. At that, the boy takes her hand and says he's going to try something to get them out of there. With a swift move, he throws her upward with all his might to help her get out. Right after, he jumps and extends his hand, trying to reach the wall to climb. But the wall is too smooth and his hand slips, causing him to lose his balance. He's shocked as he starts to fall again, and his partner desperately screams his name. The young man falls backward, and the girl tries to grab him but can't reach him in time. He groans in pain and laments getting so close, while she asks if he's okay. Suddenly, the boy sneezes, and the young woman tells him not to push himself so hard for now. The student is silent for a moment and seems to get an idea as he looks at her. Seeing that he's cold, the masked girl decides to hold his hand with hers. The boy is surprised and a little embarrassed by the young woman's unexpected gesture. She moves closer and says it's better if they stay together to conserve body heat. The girl also suggests they rest a bit, as they haven't stopped since they arrived. With that, the two sit back to back, and the young man wonders what he's doing. Suddenly, his partner calls his name, and he answers, a little nervous about the situation. The young woman then asks why he decided to join the Aberrations faction. The boy becomes thoughtful and starts to remember the reason that brought him there. In a memory from the future, he recalls a request to find Kurojori. The Hakua from his timeline was down and begged him to do something for her. With her last bit of strength, she asked him to tell this person named Kurojori about something, and with that, her hand fell lifelessly to the ground as the boy narrates that a girl asked something of him. Back in the present, he says that a girl asked him to find Kurojori and deliver a message. She's curious about the story, and he says she might find it hard to believe. The young man reveals that their world will be taken over by apparitions in the near future. The girl asks what he means, and the boy admits he doesn't know the details. He knows what he's saying sounds crazy, but he assures her it's the absolute truth. The masked young woman is silent for a moment, seeming to process the information. Then she stands up and says he's mysterious, but he doesn't seem to be lying. The boy is surprised and asks if she really believes him, and the girl confirms it. The girl smiles and thinks that for some reason, she feels she can trust his words. He remembers another girl and thinks that he couldn't tell her his name, or that he isn't human. He then calls to his partner and says he wants to ask her something as a doppelganger. The white-haired young woman looks at him and waits patiently for his important question. The student asks what she thinks about them cursing their originals in order to live. He continues, wondering if maybe doppelgangers shouldn't even exist at all. The girl is completely shocked and speechless at the boy's existential question, but the conversation is interrupted when a rock falls, and she looks up, startled. More rocks start to fall, and the two young people dodge the debris to avoid being hit. From above, the little monsters watch the two at the bottom of the hole with mischievous looks. With a wicked smile, the leader says they'll be buried alive in that trap. With that, the small creatures start throwing various objects to bury the two young people. The protagonist yells for Hakua to get behind him and prepares to deal with the debris. And then, a large explosion occurs at the bottom of the hole from the impact of the objects. The horde of monsters celebrates, believing the two were done in by the rebel. The hall is now completely covered by pieces of wood and heavy rocks. But the boy asks if his partner is okay while protecting her with a shadow hand, and we see that the two are safe under a huge shadow hand that protected them. The monster leader announces it's dinner time, and the horde starts to move away from the hole. Suddenly, a dark energy envelops the student's leg, and he prepares to jump, and with a powerful leap, he gets out of the hole, surprising one of the creatures in the process. The leader and the other monsters are completely shocked to see that he survived. The boy faces the horde of creatures with a serious look, ready for a counter-attack. His partner also gets out of the hole and kneels, relieved that the rebel actually helped them. The young man summons his dagger and says that their attempt to end everything actually saved them. But the monster leader gets angry and orders his subordinates to finish the two of them. With that, the two summon their weapons and get ready to fight the horde of monsters. And with a swift move, they charge forward and begin to take down the creatures one by one. The protagonist says they're too slow as he easily defeats another monster. Seeing the situation, the leader of the monstrous decides it's time to run to save his own skin. But before he can run, the boy appears in front of him to end the fight for good. With a determined look, the young man prepares to deliver the final blow to the leader, and using his shadow hand, he grabs the creature and crushes it with all his might. The student watches the monster being defeated with a serious and focused expression, and with a final cry of pain. The leader of the monstrous is finished by the boy's power. The young man says it was an annoying interruption, and that he needs to find the shadow eater. With that, the two start running through the abandoned city again in search of the main monster. Their footsteps echo through the empty streets as they hurry to complete their mission. They continue their search, holding hands so they don't get separated in the city's darkness. Suddenly, the protagonist stops and says he's found the monster they were looking for. The bizarre creature stares at them from a distance, and the boy confirms he's finally found it. He then summons his shadow hands and declares that he won't let the monster get away. The creature senses the attack, and its yellow eyes glow in the darkness of the city. With a swift move, the shadow hand successfully grabs the monster, but to the young man's surprise, the creature easily breaks free from the shadow prison, and then the monster materializes a huge, dark scythe for the imminent combat. The protagonist is completely shocked to see the bizarre creature wielding a weapon. Seeing the danger, the masked girl charges forward with her dagger to attack the monster first. But the creature effortlessly blocks the attack with its scythe and stares her down. The boy realizes their attacks aren't working and that the enemy's level is much higher. The anomaly prepares to attack with its scythe, which now glows with a red light. And with a fast and powerful slash, the creature launches a devastating attack at the two young people. The girl explains that it must have consumed many human shadows to be so strong. The protagonist becomes desperate and wonders what they can do in this situation. His partner then suggests that if they combine their shadows, they might have a chance, but the monster doesn't give them time to think and launches another powerful attack with its scythe. The young man looks at his partner and asks what she means by combining their shadows. She then holds out her hand and calls him by his fake name, asking him to come closer. He hesitates for a moment, but ends up taking her hand to begin the power combination. An aura of intense energy surrounds their hands as they combine their shadows. The student feels immense power flowing through his body, and his appearance changes for an instant. And as his partner transfers her energy, the monster launches another powerful attack at them. The boy holds out his hand to defend himself, and his palm now glows with an intense blue light. A huge wave of purple and pink energy collides with the monster's attack in the middle of the courtyard. The bizarre creature is surprised by the strength of the two young people's combined attack. But even so, the monster's power begins to overcome the student's combined energy. Seeing this, the boy leaps with his dagger and shouts that this is the end of the battle for the monster. And with an impressive jump, he charges at high speed toward the bizarre creature. With his dagger enhanced by their combined power, he strikes the monster with a mighty blow. After the attack, the young man lands on the ground while the creature stands motionless for a moment. He looks at his dagger and is impressed by the power boost it received. The masked girl runs to him and celebrates their victory, while the boy happily agrees. With the creature's defeat, the stolen shadows begin to leave its vanquished body. The two watch the shadows float away, knowing they will now return to their owners. The boy realizes they are still in the night realm and the red moon hasn't disappeared. Suddenly, the girl calls out to him and points to something in the sky with a surprised expression, and we see the red moon is returning to normal, and now they can go home. With a relieved smile, the young man is thankful he can finally leave that place. And with that, the two begin to walk back to the portal to leave the night realm. As he walks, the boy thinks of his friend and hopes she is okay and safe. He thanks Hakua for coming with him, and she says it's natural to help a rookie. The young woman stops walking and says there's something she needs to tell him before they go. She admits that he was actually the one who helped her, and the boy denies it, saying it's not true. The student insists that without her help, he never would have been able to defeat the monster. His partner smiles and says that it was a joint effort from both of them to win the battle. She thanks him for everything, says she'll report everything to headquarters, and says goodbye. But before she can leave, the boy calls out to her, and she turns around to listen. He then says he wants to talk about the question he asked her in the night realm. The white-haired girl looks at him and waits patiently for him to continue. The young man repeats his question, wanting to know what she thinks about them cursing their originals. He also asks if they, as doppelgangers, should really have the right to exist. His partner becomes thoughtful for a moment and begins to answer the boy's question. She explains that cursing one's original is an inescapable fate for a doppelganger, and even if they've already done it, it's something that can never be undone in any way. So, if he feels guilty about it, The only choice is to find a way to redeem himself. The student is confused by her answer and asks how he can do that. The masked girl says that's something he needs to figure out on his own. The boy becomes thoughtful at her words and repeats that he needs to figure it out himself. But she smiles and says that if it gets too hard, he can always talk to her about it. The young man is surprised and a bit moved by his partner's kindness and support. She says goodbye with a wave and tells him they should meet again on another mission. With a smile, the boy thanks her for everything and also waves goodbye to her. He stands in silence for a moment, seeming to reflect on everything that happened. Then, he runs back to the hideout to see how his friends are doing now. When he arrives, he apologizes for being late and finds his friend sitting on the living room floor. The blonde friend seems to be sleeping peacefully after all the stress he went through. The protagonist is relieved to see that Ren is okay and safe after the monster's attack. But his relief turns to panic when he sees his friend collapsed on the couch, still unconscious. Worried, he kneels beside her and checks if she's okay after the attack. He notices her shadow has returned, but the young woman remains unconscious and mumbles something. Suddenly, the girl opens her eyes and calls his name. Still a bit sleepy, confused, she sits up on the couch and asks where she is, not remembering anything. With a confused expression, the young woman wonders if she was sleeping the whole time. The boy smiles, relieved, and says he's very happy she's okay and safe. Just then, the blonde friend wakes up and stretches, confused by the situation. He runs to his friend and celebrates, relieved to see she's finally back to normal. The young woman is confused by her friend's words and says she doesn't remember much of anything. But before he can talk about the monster, the protagonist interrupts him with a signal. The boy explains that she's confused and telling her everything now will only make things worse. The girl then asks what happened, and the two friends are at a loss for words. The protagonist suggests taking her to the hospital so a doctor can check if everything is okay. The blonde friend agrees silently, seeming to understand what the protagonist is planning. The scene changes, and we see the front of a hospital at night with a calm atmosphere. The girl comes out of the doctor's room and thanks him for the check up in his care. The blonde friend asks how the exam went, and she smiles and says there's nothing wrong. Suddenly, she notices the protagonist is no longer there and asks where he went. Her classmate says he had to leave because he remembered he had other plans for today. The young woman finds that odd, and her friend agrees, thinking he dodged the question about the monster. With a sly smile, the protagonist watches from a distance and thinks that he knew something. The blonde friend wonders how the boy intended to get the shadows back on his own. He then calls his friend and asks how much she remembers about what happened earlier. The young woman becomes thoughtful and tries to remember the events that led to her passing out. In a memory, she sees herself being attacked by a bizarre and shadowy creature. She explains that a black thing appeared, and after that, everything went blank. Seeing that she doesn't remember anything, her friend asks if she knows what apparitions are. The young woman is confused by the question and repeats the word, not understanding what it means. The scene changes, and we see the protagonist sitting alone on a park bench at night. He thinks that Ran is hiding something and wonders what he should do next. He questions whether he should tell the truth, but knows that would reveal his identity. The scene shifts to a flashback, where we see two children playing happily in a park. And then we see a dirty and ragged young man watching the scene from afar, looking sad. The mysterious young man stares at the children with an expression of envy and loneliness on his face. One of the children kicks the ball to him and calls him by the name Rito to play with them. The young man smiles happily and runs to play with them with the soccer ball in the park. Back in the present, he thinks that he still can't reveal that he's not the real Rito. A few days later, we see the protagonist walking alone on a deserted street. He looks at his phone and thinks that his training starts today, but he doesn't know where the location is. Suddenly, a mysterious man in a trench coat passes by him and glances at him for a moment. The boy feels a chill and a strange sensation as he passes the mysterious man. He turns around, startled, and tries to see who it was. but the man had already vanished from the street. The protagonist looks into a dark alley and wonders if it was just his imagination. He tries to calm down and tells himself he must have imagined it, but he still has a bad feeling. With a suspicious look, he continues to search for the training location in the city. He finds a suspicious door in an alley and wonders if this is the right place. On the door, he sees the symbol of the Aberrations faction and confirms he's found the spot. He remembers that the door would be unlocked and carefully opens it to enter. With a bit of hesitation, he goes down a dark staircase toward the building's basement. When he arrives, he finds an empty arena and asks if anyone is there to greet him. Suddenly, a voice greets him, and he turns around, surprised to see who it belongs to. The man introduces himself as Rose and says he'll be his trainer from now on. The boy introduces himself as Salt, and the trainer tells him to relax and not be so formal. Rose says he'll start by teaching the basics of the faction, and the young man asks what that is. The trainer turns and reveals that the first lesson is the night realm transposition. The student is surprised to hear the name of the technique, and seems to recognize it from somewhere. He remembers the mysterious man who used this ability to take him to the night realm, and with a simple touch, the man opened a portal and took him to the other world. The young man confirms that this was the technique Rai used the first time he went there. The trainer realizes he's been there before and asks if he's been a few times. He explains that in Yatagarasu, those who can't go there on their own are useless. The instructor says the night realm is another dimension, and to get there, you have to force your way through. And if you get the coordinates wrong, the rookie could end up in a completely different place in space. A little scared, the boy asks how he can connect the dimensions like that. With that, the trainer shows him a glowing blue stone and says that's how it's done. He explains that first, you have to fight the apparition haunting the stone to tame it, and suddenly, a dark aura emerges from the stone and begins to take shape in front of the young man. The aura transforms into a bizarre monster with several red, glowing eyes. Startled, the boy cries out in surprise upon seeing the shadowy creature suddenly appear. The monster fully materializes and stares at the student as he drops the stone. The trainer laughs at the rookie's reaction as the creature floats in front of the frightened boy. He tells the young man to be careful because he'll be keeping an eye on him during the training, but he warns that if he lets his guard down for a second, the creature will finish him. The student panics as he sees the monster charging toward him at high speed. The scene changes, and we see the front of a building with a fire escape on a sunny day. Someone's footsteps echo down the hallway as they approach a door. A man in sunglasses enters the apartment and says he's home to Yuri. Suddenly, a large, shadowy creature appears and calls him Big Brother, saying it's hungry. The man says he just ate, and the creature glares at him with an angry expression. The creature says it wasn't enough, and the man holds out his hand with a calm expression. With a wicked smile, the man suggests they go out hunting a little later. He says they're going to make the humans, who turned him into that, pay for what they did. The scene changes to a sunny day with a blue sky and some light, white clouds, and we see the protagonist is in his classroom, paying attention to the teacher, but fatigue hits him, and he ends up falling asleep at his desk during the teacher's lesson. His friend Rakuna watches him from a distance, looking a little worried about his behavior. The scene changes, and we see the front of the school on a sunny day with a blue sky. After class, the boy wakes up and yawns, feeling the exhaustion from his intense training. Suddenly, Rakuna approaches and asks what's been going on with him lately. He makes up an excuse, saying he's gotten hooked on an online game so as not to worry her. His friend is silent for a moment, seeming not to really believe his excuse. The student asks if this is the first time since that day, and the young woman is confused. He's referring to the day they went to the secret base, and she seems to remember. The boy gets a little nervous bringing it up, but knows he needs to ask. He then calls her by name and holds her arm, with a serious expression on his face, and with a determined look, he asks why she ran away from the secret base that day. The young woman gets nervous at the question and tries to find an excuse to answer. She remembers being attacked by a bizarre and frightening monster that day. With a scared expression, She says she was attacked by a strange black monster. But the boy laughs and says she was just tired and that monsters don't really exist. With a serious expression, Rakuna asks if he's been hiding something from her lately. The reflection in her eyes shows the boy with a panicked and nervous expression. He denies it and says he's not hiding anything, but she yells that he's lying again. Their argument draws the attention of the other students in the empty classroom. Rakuna says he's always lying, and that he was doing it a long time ago, too. The boy is confused by her words and asks what she means by that. But she makes up an excuse and says she needs to go to the bathroom to get away from the conversation. With a sad expression, she wonders why he keeps lying to her. The scene shifts to a flashback where we see children playing in a sunny playground, and we see the two young people on a swing set as the boy calls Rakuna over to talk. With a serious expression, he says that he might not live for much longer. We see the young Rito on the swing as a caption introduces him as her childhood friend. Rakuna is shocked and asks where he suddenly got that crazy idea. The boy stands up and says that if that happens, she needs to do something for him, but before he can finish, he runs off, leaving her alone in the playground. We see Rakuna at her window, watching her friend walk away with concern. In her room, she sighs, seeming very worried about his strange behavior. Suddenly, her mother enters the room and says she has some bad news about Rito. With a shocked expression, she reveals that the young man was lost to the sea and didn't make it. Back in the present, the young woman remembers being terrified by the news that day, and outside the classroom, the protagonist overhears the conversation and looks a little guilty. In the school hallway, he sighs, looking frustrated with the complicated situation. He knows they are suspicious, but he can't drag them into this dangerous world. Suddenly, he gets a text message about a chupacabra sighting. He knows he can't leave school, but doing so would only raise more suspicion about him. With a determined look, he holds the strap of his pants and seems to have made a decision. He apologizes and says it's to protect her as he runs down the school hallway. The scene changes to the training arena, where he attacks the creature with his dagger, and with a powerful slash, he manages to defeat the monster and finish his training. The creature dissolves into purple smoke, leaving the luminous stone behind on the ground. The boy breathes a sigh of relief, and his trainer congratulates him on a job well done. The instructor picks up the stone from the ground and hands it to the young man as a reward for his training. He explains that with the stone, he can teleport and even drag apparitions there. The student is surprised, and the trainer says that fighting where they want can be a problem. With a smile, the instructor says he's counting on him for future missions. He also mentions that his uniform should be arriving any moment and seems to hear something. The scene changes to an abandoned factory where the trainer and Hakua are waiting for him. The masked girl waves and calls him by his fake name, telling him to hurry up. The protagonist arrives and asks if the two of them were also called for the mission, but the trainer reveals that he was the one who called them, as he's responsible for the area. He compliments the boy's new uniform and says the second-hand outfit suits him well. Hakua agrees and says he should have more confidence because the uniform looks great. With that, the instructor announces it's time for them to head out for the mission in the factory. The trio enters the abandoned place and finds themselves in a dark, dusty warehouse. The boy comments that the place is a mess, and Hakua says the apparition must be inside. The trainer explains that the rumor is that thrill seekers saw a chupacabra there. Suddenly, they come across something shocking, and the boy cries out in surprise at the scene. On the floor, they find a giant green creature, already defeated and lying in a pool of fluid. The instructor wonders if the target was taken down by someone else before they arrived. The protagonist suggests another faction member might have gotten there first, but Hakua doubts it. Suddenly, the trainer notices something, and his eyes widen with a sense of danger, and with a desperate shout, he orders the two young people to get out of there immediately. Startled, they look up, not understanding the reason for their superior's panic, but before they can react, a pillar of blue energy appears and hits them with full force. In the middle of the smoke, a giant, muscular figure emerges and the boy wonders what that is. The creature glares at them with its glowing eyes and says humans are evil and need to be gone. The boy stares at the creature and wonders who this immense being in front of him is. With a cold gaze, the creature says that humans are evil and that it will put an end to all of them. Suddenly, the student is thrown backward by a blast of blue electric energy, and we see the creature concentrating a large amount of lightning in its fist. The monster attacks with a powerful punch, but the boy manages to dodge at the last second. With a shocked expression, the young man realizes the monster's power is lightning. He lands at a safe distance while blue sparks still crackle around him. The instructor helps the rookie and comments that the being's aura is bizarre and monstrous. At that moment, they see Hakua on the ground, struggling to get up after the attack. The creature then turns and prepares an attack to finish off the defenseless girl. Desperate, the trainer shouts his companion's name to warn her of the danger. Then he quickly dashes toward the girl to try to save her in time, but the instructor gets there first and puts himself in front of her to take the blow. The impact sends him flying, and he shouts for them to be careful. Hakua gets up and draws her dagger, determined to fight the monster. She tries to attack the creature's arm, but it easily grabs her by the wrist. With that, the monster zaps her with its power, and the girl cries out in pain from the shock. She falls to the ground, completely defeated, and seems to have passed out from the attack. Seeing his partner on the ground, the protagonist shouts her name in despair. He looks at his fallen friends and wonders what kind of creatures these are. The creature also seems confused and wonders what these beings are. Lying near some barrels, the trainer says his body is numb from the shock. Suddenly, a meow echoes through the place, and we see the paws of a cat walking around. The boy is surprised to see a small cat walking calmly amidst the chaos. He wonders if it's just a cat as the feline sits down and licks its paw. But the giant creature notices the animal and starts walking toward it. The protagonist shouts for the monster not to harm the innocent animal on the ground. To his surprise, the creature carefully picks up the cat and holds it gently. The young man is shocked and seems to recognize the cat, calling it by name. The cat meows and rubs against the monster's face, while the boy tells it to stop. Confused, the student wonders what he is carrying on his back now. He remembers when he met Hakua and was told to report it if he saw that dog, and he also remembers the warning that sooner or later it would be his enemy. The monster, with the cat on its shoulder, asks why he was snooping around the base. With a smile, the boy realizes the monster was near the gate the whole time. Suddenly, a man in sunglasses appears, and the creature asks what he's planning. The young man becomes alert and prepares to fight the new enemy that has appeared. The mysterious man in the white coat just watches them from above with a superior air. In a memory, the man says he just wanted to feel, and another character agrees with him. Back in the present, the stranger says he will stain the world with apparitions to cleanse it. The trainer, lying on the ground, begins to groan in pain and seems to be suffering a lot. He yells that he doesn't want to fight anymore, and the man with glasses asks what he's doing. With a wicked smile, the man adjusts his glasses and reveals that it's all an experiment. The instructor is shocked and can't believe it was all a test. With one eye glowing red, he confirms that it was, and that everything was planned. He says he will fill the world with anomalies and reset it. As Hakua cries out in pain, the scene changes, and we see a girl fighting a bizarre creature in a room. She seems tired but remains on her knees, determined not to give up the fight. The monster prepares to attack her, and she wonders if this is Hakumu. Suddenly, she is hit by an attack, and the creature asks what's wrong, and the girl is thrown hard against the wall, as if she were nothing. From afar, the man in the white lab coat watches everything from a lab with a calm demeanor. With a confident smile, he seems pleased with the results of his experiment. Back at the factory, we see Hakua panting and in a lot of pain after being attacked. At this, the protagonist approaches, concerned, and helps her up from the ground. At that moment, she looks up and sees the mysterious man watching everything with indifference. The villain says he doesn't have time to deal with their group because he has more to do. The boy is surprised by the man's words and doesn't understand what he means. Then the blue creature says its time is up, and that it needs to go home soon. The man in white holds out his hand and prepares to use some strange ability. Suddenly, a glowing red portal opens in the middle of the abandoned factory. The trio is shocked, and the boy shouts the name of the new apparition that emerges from the portal. A giant hand made of fire comes out of the portal and grabs something with great force. We see that the hand belongs to a giant, flaming being that is coming out of the portal. Frightened, the student asks what on earth that fiery thing in front of him is. The creature reveals itself completely and is a giant, intimidating fire golem. The villain turns to leave and says the fire monster will take care of the rest. Desperate, the young man reaches out his hand and shouts for the man to wait a moment. But he feels intense pain from the immense heat the creature is giving off. The fire golem looks down on the group with an overwhelming and terrifying presence. The trainer says the building is going to catch fire and that they need to send the monster back. But he realizes the teleportation stone isn't working, and they'll have to fight right there. With his dagger in hand, the boy wonders what is happening in this place. His eyes reflect the flames, and he feels that something is very wrong with the situation. He remembers the villain and realizes that the creatures and the orcs are connected somehow. The villain comments that the night energy was intentionally blocked by a stake. He calls the heroes idiots and says the cat gathering is almost over. With a wicked smile, he challenges Yadagarasu to defeat his genetic abomination. Back in the fight, the fire golem clenches its fist and prepares for a powerful attack. The trainer and the boy brace themselves as they realize the monster is about to attack with full force. And with a punch to the ground, it creates an explosion that sends both of them flying. The student then summons his shadow dagger and prepares for a counter-attack. With a leap, he charges toward the golem to attempt a direct attack. But as he gets closer, he is surprised by something and stops his attack in mid-air. The golem seizes the opportunity and attacks the young man with a devastating blow from its arm. Suddenly, a wave of dark energy hits him and throws him back with force. The monster's attack misses its target and hits the ground, creating another large explosion. The boy hits the ground hard and cries out in pain from the impact of the dark energy. The instructor steps in front of Hakua and says he'll handle the situation now. The girl is worried and asks her superior what he intends to do. Suddenly, the trainer's hand begins to transform into an animal's paw. He transforms into a werewolf and tells the girl to just watch the fight. With a fierce roar, he prepares to face the fire golem with everything he has, and at high speed, he charges toward the monster and hits it with a punch. His eyes glow with determination as he faces the fire golem up close. The golem's body begins to crack, and sparks of fire fly from the point of impact. Sitting on the ground, the boy watches the fight, and is impressed by his master's power. The instructor lands and says the monster is tough, as smoke comes from his fist. The golem's chest begins to glow intensely, and it seems to be charging an attack. The werewolf senses the danger and faces the creature with a very serious expression. The golem shoots a blast of fire, and the trainer shields himself with his arms, startled. He realizes he can't advance, and the rookie says he'll distract the creature. With that, the fire monster starts destroying everything around it with its flames. The instructor warns that he can't protect them, and tells them not to get finished as he moves forward. With a focused look, the boy notices that the direct attacks are evenly matched in the fight, but he knows that the creature's flames are a big problem for them at the moment. So, to create an opening for Rose, he decides to use his shadow ability, and with a hand gesture, he summons several shadow hands to attack the fire golem. The hands charge forward and begin to grab the flaming body of the giant creature. Slowly, the shadows envelop the monster and try to completely immobilize it. But suddenly, the student is shocked to see that his attack isn't working. The intense heat repels his shadow hands, and he is thrown back by the force. Lying on the ground, he wonders what he can do to defeat that apparition. Hakua gets up, and he tells her not to move, but she can't stay still. The girl says she will share her power with him, so they can win together. Meanwhile, the werewolf jumps onto the golem's arm to try a new attack. With a determined expression, he prepares to land a blow with all his strength, and with a powerful punch, he hits the monster, but seems to feel the impact of the blow. The boy receives Hakua's power and announces that he has gained a new ability. With this, he uses his strengthened shadow hands to trap the creature for good, and seizing the opportunity, he shouts for his master to attack the immobilized golem. The trainer gets the message and prepares to deliver the final blow to the apparition. With a powerful leap, he charges toward the fire monster's chest, and in mid-air, he prepares a punch with all the strength he has in his body. His fist clenches, and he aims right for the energy core of the flaming creature. But upon landing the blow, he realizes the monster is much tougher than it seemed. The student yells for him to hurry, because he won't be able to hold on for much longer. Not knowing what to do, he feels his energy slowly draining and becomes desperate. The shadow hands begin to dissolve from the intense heat of the golem's body. Suddenly, the young man has an idea, and a glimmer of hope appears in his eyes. A pool of shadows forms beneath his feet, and he smiles at his new plan. Hakua is worried and asks what on earth he's doing with that energy. The pool of shadows begins to grow and spread across the factory floor, and suddenly, the pool starts to pull the golem into a shadow dimension. Surprised, his friends wonder if he's serious about this crazy idea. The boy decides that if he can't win, he will absorb the apparition's power. With a great effort, he manages to completely pull the golem into the pool. But he knows that if he's not quick, the shadows will also consume him in the process. With a cry of pain, he struggles to control the immense power he just absorbed. The golem's arms sink into the dark pool and disappear completely from sight. The rest of the monster's body is pulled in, and the factory falls silent again. The flames go out, and only a pool of shadows remains where the creature was. His friends run to him and ask if he's okay after the battle. Worried, they look at the pool and tell him to say something soon. Suddenly, a hand emerges from the darkness and rests on the edge of the shadow pool. The boy climbs out of the pool, exhausted, and Hakua calls his name, relieved he's safe. With a smile, she says she can't believe he actually thought about doing that. The young man looks at his friends, but his body can no longer handle the exhaustion from the fight. And with that, he collapses on the floor while his friends desperately shout his name. His eyes close, and he loses consciousness after the intense and dangerous battle. The boy wakes up startled and finds himself leaning on his trainer after fainting. As he opens his eyes, he sees the entire factory in flames and is shocked. His master is carrying him on his back, and the boy apologizes for passing out. The trio watches the fire, and the student says they need to call the firefighters right away. With a smile, Rose says he's already contacted reliable help, and they don't need to worry. Suddenly, a mysterious woman appears, and he says he's counting on her. The masked woman is Miyuki, an executive of the Aberrations faction, and she seems powerful. The young man recognizes the woman and remembers seeing her at the faction's headiot. He asks if she's an executive, and Hakua confirms that she is an ice user. Rose apologizes for the call, and she complains that the area isn't her jurisdiction. With a serious expression, Miyuki prepares to use her ice abilities. She says she'll let it slide this time, and an icy aura completely envelopes her. The two are amazed by her power, and he asks if that is snow. With a wave of her hand, she conjures a powerful blizzard to put out the fire. The boy is surprised by her form and wonders what kind of power that is. Miyuki takes the form of a snow woman, and her appearance changes completely. Hakua points to the burning building and gets her friend's attention to the scene. And with Miyuki's blizzard, the flames of the factory begin to extinguish quickly. With a satisfied smile, the snow woman observes her work with pride. Back at the base, the instructor finishes his report for the leader of the Aberrations faction. The chief confirms it was the man in white who created the portal and summoned the apparition. Rose says the villain's aura was half human and half apparition, which is dangerous. Hearing this, the protagonist remembers feeling that aura somewhere else. The camera focuses on Hakua sitting silently and thoughtfully during the meeting at the base. Worried, The student asks if she's okay after the intense battle at the factory. Suddenly, the faction leader slams the table, getting everyone's attention in the room. The girl apologizes and says she was just lost in her thoughts. The trainer remembers that the villain seemed to know who she was and is intrigued. With a serious expression, Hakua confirms that she knows who the man in the white lab coat is. The scene shows the villain with a wicked smile and a red glow in his eyes. The leader asks who captured her in the past, and she seems uncomfortable. The girl shrinks in her chair and seems unwilling to talk about the sensitive topic. With some hesitation, she begins to tell her story to the others, and with a sigh, she confirms that the truth is she was born from the shadows one day. The scene changes to a flashback, where we see a train passing by on a dark night, alone at a level crossing. She didn't know how to survive in this world. With nowhere to go, she wandered the streets with no one to help her. Completely lost, she looked for food in the trash to keep from starving. Until one day, she met a mysterious man who would change her life forever. Sitting in an alley, she looks at him with an expression of fear and distrust. The man in the white lab coat holds out his hand and invites her to go with him somewhere. He asks why she won't go with him, and the young woman seems to consider the offer. With a smile, she accepts the invitation, but she had no idea what awaited her in the future. She was locked up and used in experiments that were no different from torture. Amidst the fear and despair, she awakened a hidden power within herself, and with that, she learned to use the power of shadows and wield a dagger. The scene shows the villain observing his experiments with a satisfied and cruel air. After that, she was forced to fight in endless battles against Aberrations. The man made her fight against all kinds of monsters, while he just watched. Even after being freed, she continued to fight, because she had no other way to live. With a sad expression, she continues her story for the other members of the faction. She reveals that the villain's name is Akira, and the apparition is his younger brother, Yuri, and his favorite phrase was that he would drown the rotten world in apparitions to purify it. The leader is furious to learn that he was the one who abused Hakua, and that his ambitions are great. With a serious expression, the student asks how she managed to get away from them. The girl reveals that she never ran away because the idea of escaping never even occurred to her. Everyone in the room falls silent, shocked by the revelation she just made. She remembers the villain saying that humans are dangerous, and that apparitions are hunted, and that he kept repeating it until she was completely brainwashed. The young man asks what made her change, and she says it was because she met someone special. In a flashback, we see the girl lying on the ground near a river on a sunny day. She is unconscious and seems to have passed out after a battle or training session. Suddenly, someone calls out to her, and she wakes up, startled by the unfamiliar voice. A young man with blonde hair looks at her, concerned, and asks if she's okay there. The young man approaches the girl lying on the ground, looking concerned about her condition. Suddenly, she wakes up and grabs him by the arm with a frightened expression on her face. She jumps back, getting into a defensive stance, wary of him. The boy tells her to calm down and not be so defensive with him. She remembers the villain saying that humans are foolish and wild creatures. With an aura of power, she says that humans are the enemy to be defeated. The boy is surprised by her words and doesn't understand the reason for her hostility. Suddenly, a giant hand of energy appears and prepares to attack him with full force. She seems determined to follow the orders she received from her former master. The energy hand attacks, and the young man shields himself with his arms, waiting for the impact. But to his surprise, the girl falls to the ground, and he realizes he wasn't hit. With a confused expression, he wonders what just happened to her. He looks at her on the ground and doesn't understand why she acted so strangely. The scene changes, and we see an abandoned bus on a starry night with a full moon. Inside the bus, the girl sleeps peacefully in one of the blue seats. Suddenly, she wakes up and the boy greets her, saying she finally woke up. Startled, she sits up and looks at him, not understanding where she is or what happened. He offers her a bottle of water and tells her not to worry so much about him. The young man watches her in silence as she takes the water to drink a little. With that, He asks if she's hungry and offers some snacks he got. We see that he brought rice balls and some chips for her to eat. Worried, he asks how her injuries are and if she feels pain anywhere. She just stares at him in silence and doesn't answer any of his questions. In a weak voice, the girl asks why he is being so kind to her. With a smile, he realizes she finally spoke and seems relieved. She confesses that she was about to attack him and doesn't understand his kindness toward her. The boy says he was scared and asks what she is, since she's not a mage. With a serious expression, she reveals that she is not human and looks at him in silence. She says that after that, he took care of her for a while and invited her to eat. And the two of them sit down to eat instant ramen in a quiet place. As they eat, he asks if she's a doppelganger and seems curious. With a nod, she confirms that she is and continues eating her ramen. The boy asks if there is a human with the same appearance and age as her, and with the time she spent with him, her fear of humans gradually disappeared. The boy says he doesn't care what she is and asks her not to be afraid. His words surprise her, and she looks at him, not knowing what to say. One day, he gets up to leave, and she asks where he's going, and he says it's to school. He reveals that he's transferring schools and won't be able to visit her like before. Shocked by the news, she can't hide her sadness about the farewell. With a gentle smile, he says goodbye and wishes for her to take care of herself from now on. And just like that, he left, leaving her alone again in the abandoned bus. Suddenly, she realizes he forgot his wallet on the bus seat. With the wallet in her hands, she gets off the bus to try to return it in time. She looks at the wallet and remembers the kindness he showed her. Inside the wallet, she finds a note with money and a request for her to use it. In that moment, she made a promise to never go back to the lab. Freed from the brainwashing, she acted on her own for the first time in her life. And then, she finds a job ad on a post on a city street. With that, she enters a bar and comes across two men talking at the counter. With determination, she points to the ad and shows that she's there for the job. She says she found San, and that he was the one who introduced her to Yatagarasu, and that he taught her everything about the faction, so she could change her life. With her new boots, she began to walk a new path for her future, and to one day repay the favor to the boy who gave her the chance to be free. With a new determination, she decided to leave her past behind and move forward, and so she joined the organization and finished her story for the others in the room. The instructor understands the story and asks who exactly the villain who captured her is. She reveals that his name is Akira Tanagashi, and that he is always with Aberrations, and that he wants to use the Abominations to destroy the world and create a new one for them. She says she doesn't know his reasons, but that he seems to deeply hate humanity. Hearing this, the protagonist and Hakua look at each other and seem to be thinking about something important. He remembers a vision of the future where monsters attacked the city and the people. With a serious expression, he wonders if Akira is responsible for the future disaster. The leader says he's heard the name Akira Tanagashi before and seems to remember something. The others are surprised by the chief's words and look at him, waiting for an explanation. He reveals that Akira worked at a research institution called Quok. The instructor remembers the place and says it was a biological research lab. The student is surprised to learn that they were researching abominations. The chief confirms that they were, but that the place was shut down a long time ago for safety, and to combat the threat, they established their own research institution. The camera focuses on a hallway of a laboratory and reveals the name was Quok. In a flashback, we see a man with his back to the camera visiting someone in a hospital. His brother says he's fine and apologizes for him visiting even though he was busy. The man smiles, but his reflection in the glass shatters, revealing a distorted face. An image of the apparition appears, and we see that his brother passed away in the hospital bed. With a red eye, the villain remembers his brother's passing and seems to feel hatred. In his room, he puts a hand to his head and seems to have a headache. He sits on his bed and looks sadly at a photo in a picture frame. The photo shows him and his younger brother smiling and holding a cat. The scene changes to the villain's base, where he works on his computer with the apparition. The monster sits on the floor and plays with a cat using a feather toy. The cat seems happy and is having a lot of fun with the toy the creature is holding. The villain approaches and asks if he's having fun, and the apparition meows in response. He asks why his brother doesn't give the cat a name, and the creature looks at him. The monster thinks of a name for the cat, while its brother silently leaves the room. Akira walks down a dark hallway, seemingly heading somewhere important. He goes up a staircase and stops in front of a door, with a serious expression. With a determined look, he thinks that the heroes really did defeat the golem. He looks at a tank with a giant creature inside, and says it doesn't matter how many they defeat. The creature inside the tank opens its eyes, showing its sharp and ferocious teeth. With a wicked smile, he says that soon the world will come to its inevitable end. The scene changes to a school in the late afternoon with a beautiful, orange sky. The protagonist leaves the classroom and seems to be in a hurry to go somewhere. He knows he needs to get to the meeting point soon and runs down the hallway. But before he can leave, a voice calls out to him, making him stop in his tracks. His friends find him and ask why he's in such a hurry today. With an awkward smile, he makes up an excuse and says he's going to a gaming event. He says goodbye and runs off while his friend asks him to wait a moment. The girl comments that he hasn't been hanging out with them much lately and seems sad. She calls Ren and asks about what they talked about the other day at school. He's confused, and she refers to the conversation they had at the hospital. She calls him and asks if he knows anything about the creatures called abominations, and with a serious expression, he reveals that he saved an abomination girl a long time ago. The young woman is shocked by his revelation and doesn't know what to say. She asks if what the protagonist is hiding has to do with the abominations. With an awkward smile, he dodges the question and says he doesn't know anything about it. Annoyed, the girl shouts that they are both horrible and that she feels left out. The boy tries to calm her down and says it's not true, but she doesn't believe him. Angrily, she says that if they don't tell her, she'll find out everything on her own, and with that, she runs down the hallway, and the boy tries to call her back. But it's too late, and he's left behind, frustrated with the complicated situation. The scene changes to a view of the city, with an orange sun in the late afternoon sky. In an alley, the student waits for his trainer and impatiently checks his phone. He realizes his master is late and that he should have been there by now. Suddenly, he hears a scream and is startled by the unexpected noise in the alley. Without a second thought, he runs toward the sound to see what happened. He follows the sound of the scream and carefully approaches a brick building. Suddenly, a bizarre, bandaged creature appears and desperately asks for help. The boy recognizes the creature and remembers being attacked by it before. The bandaged being recognizes him and seems relieved to have found him in the alley. With that, it grabs him and asks for help against the abominations from the night realm, and it reveals that the creatures are trying to eat it, and it doesn't know what to do. The young man's eyes widen as he sees the abominations approaching them. A horde of bizarre monsters appears and prepares to attack the two of them right there. The bandaged being abandons him and says it will leave the rest to him before fleeing. Surrounded by the creatures, the student prepares to fight all of them alone. With a serious expression, he prepares to use his night realm ability. His eyes glow with power as he concentrates to activate his special technique. He activates the transmigration burial, and snow begins to fall around him in the alley. The abominations roar in anger and prepare to attack the young man with everything they have. With a wave of his hand, he summons his shadows and easily defeats one of the creatures. He wields his shadow dagger and moves with agility among the monsters. One of the monsters stares at him with its glowing eyes and prepares to attack, but the boy finishes it with a quick slash and says it won't escape from there. With his shadow hands, he grabs another creature and stops it from fleeing the fight. And with a powerful blow, he defeats another monster without any difficulty. Suddenly, he senses a presence behind him and turns to see what it is. With a surprised look, he realizes he's not alone in the battle against the creatures. Hakua appears in the air and charges toward a monster to help him in the fight. And with a precise slash, she defeats the abomination and saves her friend from the attack. The student shouts her name, surprised to see her there to help him in the battle. He thanks her for the help, and she tells him not to let his guard down during the fight. Worried, he asks if she can move already, and she seems a little annoyed, with a calm expression. She says she's fine, and that he doesn't need to worry, and with a smile, she says it's better if they fight together to win faster. The scene changes to an alley, and the protagonist's friend seems to have followed him. She remembers having been in that place before, and feels a little strange. In a flashback, she finds the young Ryudo sitting and helpless in the same alley. Back in the present, she wonders what he's doing and where he is now. With a determined expression, she continues her search for her missing friend. Suddenly, she comes across a cat and wonders what it's doing there. The cat meows and looks at her with its yellow, curious eyes in the middle of the alley. She's surprised to see a kitten in that place and is a little confused. The feline meows again and seems to want the attention of the girl who found it. With that, the cat rubs against her leg, and she is startled by its approach. She notices it has a collar and wonders if it has an owner nearby. She crouches down and asks if the cat is lost and what's wrong with it. Suddenly, the cat turns and starts to walk away, and she asks where it's going. With a meow, it invites her to follow, and she asks it to wait a moment. But the cat disappears, and she wonders where it went so suddenly. Suddenly, she hears a strange noise and is frightened by the unexpected sound. She turns and wonders what that strange sound she heard in the alley was. Her eyes widen in fear at the shocking scene that unfolds. The protagonist's trainer fights an abomination with his dagger and shouts in anger. He says he doesn't have time to play around and defeats the monster with a final blow. He receives a message from Hakua and realizes they've met up with the protagonist. The girl watches everything from her hiding spot and wonders what kind of thing that creature is. The scene changes to a view of the city at night with a full moon in the blue sky. Hakua says that Ro's message that he's finished and that they can wrap it up for today. With a smile, she invites him to eat together to celebrate their victory. He accepts the invitation and says the idea sounds good to relax a bit. As they walk, she asks what he would like to eat, and he thinks for a moment. They arrive at a restaurant, and he's surprised that a place like this exists. She reveals that the owner is a pigeon apparition, and he's shocked by the news. They sit down, and she praises the cheesy bread that the restaurant serves. He asks if he said something strange, and he says he didn't expect her to eat that. She says she likes it and asks him to just call her by her name, without the san. The boy asks if she likes cheese that much, and she confirms it with a smile. She asks if he likes it too, and he says a friend of his loves cheese. With a smile, she says she would definitely get along with his friend. He becomes thoughtful and asks if she wears her mask